The neighbors thought Margaret Chen had lost her mind. For a decade, strange sounds echoed from her garage at all hours. Metallic clanging, electrical humming, and the occasional bright flash that lit up the frosted windows like lightning. Delivery trucks arrived weekly with mysterious packages. The mailman swore he heard voices speaking in languages that didn't exist. But nobody, absolutely nobody, was prepared for what she was actually creating in there. Once upon a time, in the sleepy suburban town of Millfield, there lived a woman whose secret would change the world forever. Margaret Chen, a soft-spoken 58-year-old former aerospace engineer, had been dismissed from NASA 15 years earlier for proposing what her colleagues called impossible theories. They said her ideas violated the laws of physics. They said she was chasing fairy tales. They said a lot of things that would later make them eat their words in the most spectacular way imaginable. The year was 2014 when Margaret first closed her garage door and began what would become the most extraordinary decade-long project in human history. Her neighbors in the quiet cul-de-sac initially thought nothing of it. After all, plenty of retirees took up woodworking or car restoration. But as weeks turned to months and months turned to years, the sounds coming from Margaret's garage became increasingly bizarre. Mrs. Patterson from next door was the first to complain. "It sounds like she's building a spaceship in there," she told her husband over breakfast, not knowing how prophetic those words would prove to be. The electrical humming would start before dawn and continue well into the night. Sometimes the entire neighborhood's lights would flicker, as if Margaret's mysterious project was drawing enormous amounts of power from the grid. The delivery situation became equally perplexing. UPS, FedEx, and unmarked trucks arrived with packages of all sizes. Some were small and required signatures. Others were massive crates that required forklifts. The delivery drivers would glance nervously at Margaret's garage, where the sounds of construction never seemed to stop. One driver later recalled that Margaret always accepted the packages wearing thick protective gloves and safety goggles, her gray hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, oil stains on her clothes. By 2016, the neighborhood children had created elaborate theories about what Margaret was building. Some thought it was a time machine. Others believed she was constructing a robot army. The teenagers joked that she was building a portal to another dimension, not knowing they were closer to the truth than anyone imagined. Margaret herself remained a mystery. She kept to herself, politely declining invitations to neighborhood barbecues and block parties. When approached, she would smile warmly and deflect questions about her project with vague references to a little invention or something to keep my hands busy. Her grocery shopping was done online, her yard maintained by a service, and her only regular human contact seemed to be with the steady stream of delivery personnel. The really strange incidents began around year 5. Neighbors reported seeing strange lights emanating from her garage windows, not the warm yellow of incandescent bulbs or the stark white of fluorescence, but colors that seemed to shift and dance. Blues that were too blue, greens that hurt to look at directly, and occasional flashes of what one neighbor described as liquid silver light. The sounds evolved too. The metallic clanging gave way to more sophisticated noises, electronic beeps and chirps that followed complex patterns, like a computer language being spoken aloud. Sometimes neighbors swore they could hear Margaret's voice, but she seemed to be having conversations with someone who never responded audibly. The local conspiracy theorists had a field day with this information. In 2019, the power company sent technicians to investigate the irregular electrical draws coming from Margaret's property. They found that her garage was consuming roughly the same amount of electricity as a small factory, but all the paperwork was in order, and her bills were paid promptly each month. When they asked Margaret about it, she simply said she was running some equipment for a long-term project and showed them a room full of what appeared to be industrial-grade servers and cooling systems. The technicians left more puzzled than when they arrived. The equipment was unlike anything they'd seen before. Some components appeared to be standard computer hardware, but other pieces looked like they belonged in a science fiction movie. The cooling systems alone must have cost more than most people's houses. Year 7 brought the arrival of the satellites. Margaret had somehow obtained permits to install 3 large satellite dishes on her roof, pointing in different directions. The dishes were massive, far larger than anything needed for television or internet, and they moved throughout the day, tracking something across the sky. The Homeowners Association tried to complain, but Margaret's permits were ironclad, signed by agencies most people had never heard of. The electromagnetic anomalies started around year 8. Cell phones would malfunction near Margaret's house. Car radios would pick up signals that sounded like mathematical equations being read aloud in monotone voices. One neighbor's baby monitor began receiving what sounded like space communications. Long strings of numbers and letters that followed no recognizable pattern. Local ham radio operators reported that Margaret's house was broadcasting on frequencies that weren't supposed to exist. When they tried to contact her, their equipment would malfunction. The signals appeared to be reaching far beyond Earth's atmosphere, prompting wild speculation about attempted alien contact. By year 9, Margaret's project had attracted attention from much higher up the food chain. Black SUVs with tinted windows began parking on her street. Men and women in dark suits would sit in these vehicles for hours, watching her house through binoculars and taking notes. When concerned neighbors approached these vehicles, the occupants would simply state they were conducting authorized surveillance and refuse to elaborate. The breakthrough came in early 2024, during what would prove to be the final year of Margaret's secret project. Neighbors reported that the lights from her garage had become constant, not the occasional flashes they'd grown accustomed to, but a steady, pulsing glow that never stopped. The humming sound reached a crescendo that could be felt as much as heard, making dishes rattle in nearby homes. On a Tuesday morning in March, everything suddenly went quiet. For the first time in nearly a decade, no sounds came from Margaret's garage. No humming, no electronic beeps, no conversations with invisible colleagues. The silence was so complete it was unnerving. Neighbors found themselves straining to hear something, anything, that would indicate Margaret was still working on her mysterious project. 3 days later, the garage door opened. What Margaret revealed to the world that day would redefine humanity's understanding of physics, space travel, and our place in the universe. She had built the world's first functioning, faster-than-light communication device, a machine capable of sending and receiving messages instantly across impossible distances, using principles that the scientific community had declared impossible. But that wasn't all. The device wasn't just theoretical, it was operational. For months, Margaret had been in communication with 14 different intelligent species across the galaxy. The conversations neighbors had overheard weren't with imaginary friends or television shows. They were diplomatic negotiations with alien civilizations that had been trying to contact Earth for centuries. The implications were staggering. Margaret's garage contained not just a communication device, but detailed construction plans for technologies that would revolutionize human civilization. Clean energy sources, medical devices that could cure previously incurable diseases, and transportation methods that would make interstellar travel as routine as flying across the ocean. When the government scientists finally examined Margaret's work, they discovered that she had succeeded where entire teams of PhD physicists had failed. Using a combination of quantum mechanics, theoretical mathematics, and what could only be described as pure intuition, she had solved problems that had puzzled the brightest minds in science for decades. The neighborhood that had spent 10 years wondering about the strange woman in the garage suddenly found itself at the center of the most significant scientific discovery in human history. Margaret Chen, the dismissed aerospace engineer who was told her ideas were impossible, had just opened a dialogue with the cosmos. What other impossible dreams are hiding in plain sight around us? What dismissed ideas from brilliant minds deserve a second look? Margaret's story reminds us that breakthrough discoveries often come from the most unexpected places, built by determined individuals who refuse to accept that something can't be done. Share this story if you believe that the next world-changing innovation might be taking shape in someone's garage right now. What would you build if you had unlimited time, resources, and determination? Tell us in the comments below. Because somewhere out there, the next Margaret Chen might be reading, looking for inspiration to start their own impossible project.